in my opinion, part of the brand is, and it's one of the 4 P's of marketing and academia, positioning. It's where you are positioned in the mind of your consumer. Well, do they view you as someone with rings on every finger and gold and pushy? No. If you are teaching and you are educating and you're an advocate for their success and you're like, David, you know what? You mentioned that I don't think this is going to be, why don't you consider? And they're like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. So you do all that. That's your brand. And of course you need to have a decent enough website. All that needs to be done. Because if you look like you've got a AOL account and a Craigslist website, that's not going to work.
Welcome, Model FAs. David Desell here, president of Model FA and your host of the Model FA podcast. Really excited to bring to you our guest today. And this is reciprocity at its finest. Mike actually had me on his show somewhat recently, and we decided to have him on ours as well. So for those of you who are listening in, if you have a podcast or guests of ours previously that have a podcast, always willing to collaborate and reciprocate. So touch base with me if that is the case. But Mike Saunders is a speaker, best-selling author of 4 books, and a successful business coach who holds an MBA in marketing. Mike is also an adjunct professor at several universities and a member of the Forbes Coaches Council. He's interviewed hundreds of industry experts for his podcast and is always striving to learn from other thought leaders along the way. Specifically, too, he helps financial professionals who struggle with standing out from their competition to become an instant celebrity on the powerful platforms of publicity, podcasting, and publishing, which is a big passion of mine, making sure that we do our best to help advisors with their overall authority in their space and help with the relationship building with the clients that they're trying to serve. And with publicity, podcasting, and publishing, this creates omnipresence so that they're seen as an expert in authority to attract more clients, increase profits, and make more of an impact to go from a hidden hero to become the in-demand trusted advisor with indestructible authority. So they get authority, get noticed, and ultimately, of course, get clients. Mike is most passionate about seeing his family grow up with high spiritual value and providing them opportunities to succeed in life. And he's heavily involved in his local church and is focused on teaching others the benefits of giving and serving. So with that said, Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, David, thank you for having me. Yeah, reciprocity. I'm glad that you brought that up because I think that sometimes in any business interactions, you just ask. You know, sometimes I've interviewed Bob Berg and many New York Times bestselling authors, and people will ask me, how'd you get them? And I was like, I got this special technique. I asked them. So reciprocity. Yeah.
Yeah. And who doesn't like, joining a show, talking about themselves and their expertise and, through the lens of being able to help and serve others. So when you approach someone to learn more about them and highlight their story compared to approach them directly for business, it tends to be a good place to start to build a relationship.
100%.
Cool. So give us a sense as to your background. Have you always been in this PR authority-driven career that you have going on right now? Or did you get started somewhere else? Like, where did you start once you finished school?
So I really feel like I started years and years ago in the mortgage banking industry. I was the #1 producer for JP Morgan Chase. I worked with advisors and provided their clients home equity lines of credit. And so it was like, wow, they literally made a training video about my success with home equity lines and working with advisors. And I saw so many powerful benefits of that. I had one advisor one day call me and go, this guy wants $190,000 out of his portfolio to buy a RV. And of course with AUM, it's like, maybe we can find that somewhere else. And so, tax deduction and home equity and all that. So anyway, I just built that and love working with advisors. And then that was back in the, 1999 to 2010. And in the middle of that was this little thing called the economic crisis meltdown crash. And then that kind of just went away. And so I moved in from that into getting my MBA in marketing, started working. I launched my marketing agency at that time, and I made a massive mistake. And I feel like a lot of advisors might be making the same mistake and they need to tighten up what they're doing. So here's my mistake. I was all things to all people. Oh, you need marketing? You need text message marketing? I can do that. SEO? I can do that. And it's like, I'll have to learn along the way, but I'm going to do it. And so I started doing a little of this and a little of that. And I was a jack of all trades, but I'm not a master of any of them. So about 7 years ago, I just stopped it all, stopped the madness, and I just honed in on one thing. becoming myself and showing others how to be seen as that expert authority. Because in our own, we don't have time. We're all busy. We don't have time to interview 19 different whatever, plumbers or financial advisors or whatever, the realtors. We want to just go to the best and go to someone that we know is going to get the job done. So when I started doing that for myself, I started noticing that, oh, well, people are responding much better now that I've got, started thinking of my authority positioning assets I was building. And then I thought, if I can do it for me, let me do it for others. And then it just kind of mushroomed from there. So I just focus on 3 specific things, like you said, and it just really dials it in. And more importantly than that, knowledge is power. Well, putting that knowledge into action is power. So knowing how to do all this stuff is great. How about handing it to you and then teaching you how to easily use each one of these things so that you grow your agency? That's the biggest piece.
Cool. So up through this point, I've been a big believer in establishing your brand through various social media channels, be it LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, what have you. And I'm a big follower of Gary Vaynerchuk. And that's kind of where I grew up in this space, reading his books, his slide decks, watching his content. And I suggest to all the advisors that we're working with that, and you use a word that I use all the time, or you wrote a word in your bio, omnipresent. And I always talk about how social media allows you to not just increase, but maintain your relevance in the eyes of the people that you're looking to serve. And assuming that you're using multiple platforms, you are becoming omnipresent so that when they're at that inflection point to want to finally start doing business, because they do business on their time, not on yours, you want to be the person that they think of first because you stuck around, so to speak. So all that to say, there's a little bit of overlap, perhaps, when we talk about publicity as it relates to, staying in the public eye through social media. But you specifically referenced in your bio publicity, podcasting, and publishing. And I view those as very complementary to a social media brand. So I guess my question based on all that, and we can kind of unpack each one of them. How does someone start off in getting more publicity? Like, where does an advisor even begin?
Well, one thing that I will say is this: social media is broad, right? Which is it TikTok? Is it Instagram? Is it? So I will say that you need to know your message to your market and your solution to the problem that they have so dialed in, and your target audience so well that you know exactly which social media platforms to be on. So your omnipresence, quote unquote, might not be every social media channel out there just because you want to have many lines in the pond or lines in the lake. So I will say, pick where your target audience already goes and just be visible and present there. So that's wonderful. And then giving good content, teaching, being an educator and an advocate for their success, not push, sell, buy, but just teaching and being that go-giver. And I think that's so important. That becomes just a channel to take your content and what else can I do? So let me now repurpose this teaching piece on whatever that it is, and let me get it out to those specific social channels that I know my target audience already goes to. Now, here's something that I think is just so foundational, which is I'm all about verifying and validating what I say or how I operate with research, because it's like, oh, I'm just going to say something and take my word for it. Well, I love the 1920s and 30s authors and the 50, because that becomes foundational to what we do. And so I found this quote in this book from this person from the 1960s. His name is Marshall McLuhan, and he wrote a book called The Medium is the Message, and he's a Canadian media theorist. And basically one of the takeaways was where your content is seen gives as much value as, if not more value, than the actual content. So yeah, you might say this thing, but whatever. Like you might be an advisor that goes, you know what, I've got the perfect blueprint to, moving from here to there in retirement without incurring extra, taxes and mitigating all of these things. And I've got the blueprint. So I'm going to put that in that 2-page PDF. Okay, whatever. I'm going to put it on my WordPress blog. People like, I know that's simple and easy. I'm going to put it up on these specific social media channels. All of those are necessary. There's nothing wrong with those, but it's almost like people are just kind of not taking notice until that same piece of content is elevated to the status of, oh, you were picked up on the media. Oh, you were on a podcast talking about that thing. I'm going to sit up and take notice to that. So those platforms, those mediums where your message can be viewed and consumed now elevates you to that expert status. So your question about publicity and things like that. So do you need to be the talking head on CNN so that the nightly news, maybe one day that can be you, but fish in your pond to be the big fish in that pond. And so maybe it could be like in your local news, wonderful, your local, radio or newspaper, things like that. But maybe it is just getting your methodologies mentioned in the media so that you've got the as featured on ABC, CBS, NBC. Maybe when they Google your name, they see way more than just website, LinkedIn, social media. Maybe if they saw, featured in, a podcast interview, now that becomes that breadcrumb trail attracting people to you, because guess what? Many times people are going to get that referral from Rotary, church, the gym. Oh, talk to David. They're going to Google your name and your agency. What do they see? And so I think that's the first step, is finding where you can get that authoritative, those platforms where you can be seen, and get that done without having to go through long, arduous work. Because if it's too hard to do, it's not going to get done.
So all that stuff makes sense to me. And one question that I get a lot from advisors, and I'm curious to hear kind of how you would respond to them, is let's just assume, hey, I know the platform or the platforms where my target client hangs out, and they're in agreement that, hey, I'm going to start posting some value-based, education-based content to make sure that they're better off, having met you than having not met you, or having come across you, I should say. Then the advisors say, well, I don't know what to talk about. Like, there's so many different aspects of planning in my business and how I help people. Like, where do I even start? So if you could suggest to advisors who have this abundance of knowledge in our space, A, how should they be picking where to start with their content? And B, is there a particular structure that they should deploy in the release of that content?
I think it comes down to putting yourself in the position of your prospective clients. So think of it like this. For the most part, and I don't know statistics, but many advisors are not going after first-time investors, 20-year-olds that are looking at retirement that don't have two nickels to rub together. They're working with people that have resources and assets to invest. And that means that they probably already have an advisor they're working with now. And maybe if they're considering you, they don't like certain things about their current advisor. So what I would say is this: what is the buyer's journey? And this is a marketing term, and I teach marketing for a few universities online. This is an actual marketing thing, the buyer's journey. What does David go through when he buys that latest vehicle? Well, what are your prospects as a financial services representative or a financial advisor? What are they needing to understand about you so that they make a buying decision to come on board? Well, it might be, what kind of portfolio, all of those things, that's in the weeds. Leave that alone till later. What do they need to understand to make them go, you know what, my guy or my gal's not doing that. And you know what, I hate this about them and they don't keep me in the loop, but oh wow, David said that he focuses on. So I would just say this: why don't you do some really high-tech AI type research? And I say AI, haha, in quotes. Why don't you just call up a few of your good clients and go, you know what, before you came on board to work with me, what did you not like about your advisor that you're working with before? And what did you like? What made you make the leap to me? Because those people had assets with whoever, and now they came to work with you. When you start finding those hot spot, those triggers, now you can start creating content around that, because people do not care about return and this and market and structure and all of that, because compliance might have some issues with getting into some of those things. But all you need to do is go, look, I'm an educator, I'm an advocate, I care about you. You know what? Don't you feel frustrated when, wouldn't you like to have, and you speak to those things like people like, yes. And Tony Robbins and many people speak about, we are motivated to move away from things we don't like and move toward things we do like. So I guess I would say, David, does that make some sense? Where if an advisor could figure out 2, 3, 5, 6 type, really hot buttons that their prospects want to move away from, talk about them, and move toward, talk about them and how you solve those. Don't you hate, for the last 2 decades, I've specialized in my practice to make sure that, and people want to have a transformation in their lives, personally, professionally, financially. But in some cases, they don't need to know the transportation. They don't need to know about your thing just yet. Well, we can talk about that, in session 2 or 3 after you get to know me, like me, trust me. So to me, I think that becomes your foundation of what you create your content around. And you know what? If you like dogs or cooking or gardening, talk about that too. That personalizes you.
For those of you who are just listening to this episode, I'm smirking because we could not be more in alignment. And I want to kind of unpack, what you just said. So I always tell people essentially the same 3 things. If I boil down what you just said into 3 aspects, one is just ask the people that you're looking to serve what would be helpful to talk about. It seems pretty obvious, but a lot of times people don't think about that. It doesn't happen. It would be in no particular order, number 1. Number 2, I really like the idea that you said. What was the exact phrase? Because we use a different one that I'll share, but would you say buyers journey or
the buyer's journey.
So we create for different niches. I have one up here. I was pulling up as soon as you mentioned that. I was like, oh, cool. We got this. We have something that we call client journey maps, and we have them broken down on like a per niche basis.
Yes.
The different phases that they go through is, awareness and research, evaluation, and then ultimately the decision stage of that. And we've put together like a bunch of different questions that if we were a prospect, here's what we'd be thinking about in our awareness stage. Here's what we'd think about in the research stage. So if you're creating content based on those questions, the person on the receiving end of that's like, I feel like they're talking directly to me, right? And then you're able to handhold them through that journey as you continue to release content. So I really like that you reconfirm that. And then lastly, and I find that advisors are sometimes reluctant to do this, but post about the things that you like. Your personal life, your travel. I love to cook and I'll post cooking stuff and things like that. And it allows the people on the other side to view you as a human and not just this expert that is perhaps out of reach in their mind. It humanizes you. And by being connected with your prospects and clients on these various social platforms and people's lives on there do a great job as to leaving clues as to their transitional moments or monumental things that are happening in their life that you can touch base with them on. So I'm really glad how you succinctly put that together and kind of reconfirm the stuff that we're sharing with folks too. So
with your maps that you just mentioned, and that's an actual thing, that's validated by academia. So yes, everyone listening or watching to this, what David has put together with those maps, study those and internalize those and take action on those. Have you ever heard of Mike Koenig's marketing?
I have not, no.
Way back in the day, he created this software called Traffic Geyser. Basically, here's this video that you make, and then he just, it's a syndication platform to get a video out there. Well, anyway, he's moved on from many, many things, but he is a thought leader in marketing. So I always attribute kind of like a duck when you imprint, when the duck's born, you imprint, oh, look, he's following the dog. Well, that's the first thing they imprinted on. I always relate things to who I heard it from. So I'm giving my tip of my hat to Mike Koenig's, the top 10 FAQ, right? People, hey, you're my buyer's map. These are the frequently asked questions. But I'll bet you if we pulled that up and went line by line, I'll bet you we would find some SAQs, some should ask questions. And these are the questions that go way beyond the surface level of, how do you guys? No. Let's get down to should ask questions. And that gets into, like Bill Bacharach taught this years ago. I remember reading his book and it was like, hey, what do you feel? What's important to you about? Okay, that's good. Now, how about that? And what's important about this? And, that's a really good point. Now, what about this? You go 3, 4, 5 levels deep and you get to the heart of the matter. When you can create top 10 FAQs and SAQs, and maybe just your map that you've got there, when you create content around that and just work your way down, then go back to the top. And now this one is a video and you work your way down. And now you're going to write article. And then now this is going to be audio. Well, now you've got a body of work that can be repurposed wherever. And where I come from is this. Social media is noisy. Getting new clients for a financial advisor is competitive. You've got competitors. You've got to stand out. Well, you've got to stand out as an agency. You've got to authoritize your agency, as I call it. You need to have people just see you at one glance and go, I like what I'm seeing here. I want to learn more. Well, in and on social media, how do you stand out? Because everybody else is out there doing the Gary Vee thing, like creating content. So how do you sound different, feel different? Well, that journey map that you've got, how do you take that one piece of teaching that is a question in your target audience's mind and create content that does stand out? So here's an example. If you wrote a one-page article / LinkedIn post and put that out there, good. That's on David's journey map that I need to have, and that's good content. But maybe it just gets enveloped in everything else your prospects are seeing. And if you have the right target audience, like affluent families and business owners, they're not scrolling through carefully, cautiously looking through social media. You got to do it, right? I'm not saying not to do social media, but you got to realize that it's got to be like, bam, you got to get them. What if it's more than just that post or that article? What if it was like, oh, hey, you know what? I was just interviewed on this podcast talking about that really, hot button topic. In the interview, I just mentioned something really relevant, which is take a listen. Let me know what you think. Now, here's these people that are in your target audience going, oh, this is not a quick post or a GIF or a funny this or an article. Oh, an interview. I'm going to listen to that because you know what? And no offense to people that love video, and I love video, but let me tell you a little pet peeve of mine. When I'm watching a video and I want to have my headphones in and I want to keep doing some work on the other side because I can listen. I don't need to see your mouth moving to hear. And then Wistia or whoever they have coded up on it. When I move away from that browser and boop, it stops. I'm like, so I've got to now watch and listen. So audio is so powerful because it's versatile, it's portable. So that's where podcasting comes in. Now, you should go launch your podcast. That's wonderful. But a lot of people go, oof, that'll take an ounce of energy. Just go get on podcasts, get interviewed by people so that you can tell your story and you could talk about those things. So find that buyer's journey, find the 3 to 5 main things that would really turn the dial for your prospects to really understand and talk about those and not all of them at once. Because you know what? Here's one of my favorite books, Building a StoryBrand by Donald Miller. And he says, when you confuse, you lose. And if you start talking about all these things, thinking I'm going to hit all the hot buttons at once, they just shut down. It's too much. So pick one and go deep on that. I literally interviewed an advisor yesterday that goes, you know what? We were talking about whatever the topic was. I even forget what it was. He's like, I thought this was going to be a 5-minute conversation. We milked this thing and went way deep for 20 minutes. He goes, I never would have thought. And I'm like, yeah, because I'm asking questions and I'm bringing out, your expertise. So you have to think that way. So to circle back around and finalize this thought, you take those points like in your map that you put together, David, and hats off to you for handing that on a silver platter to your audience. Create content about that one and create content that is on platforms that people respect, the world's most powerful platforms. So go get interviewed on a podcast. Go get a press release written that you were interviewed on that, and then use those pieces in your outreach, your LinkedIn direct outreach, your LinkedIn post, your email, whatever the case is. Now people can sit up and take notice and consume that with the ear and the eye of, all right, this person's pretty legit because not everyone is on and doing this.
Hey, Model FAs. I know you're enjoying this conversation, but I wanted to take a quick break to talk to you about the Model FA Accelerator. This is a unique collaboration between us and you, where we help you build a financial advising practice that you can be proud of. We focus on the foundational concepts around how to pick a niche or a specialization, how to price your services, how to construct an offer that people are going to buy, and then how to market it and sell it in a way that'll get people to sign on the dotted line and become clients of your firm, all while giving you the information to scale and set up workflows and operational processes that will allow you to reclaim your time and build a practice that doesn't run you. So if you'd like to hear more about that, go to www.modelfa.com/accelerator or www.modelfa.com. Hover over Work With Us and click on Accelerator. Hope to see you in the program.
There's a lot in there that you just said that I want to make sure that people heard. So if you don't know where to start with content in terms of topics to speak about, you mentioned that, come up with a quick, 10-item list of FAQs. But within each of those questions, the example you use is there's about 3 additional questions that you can ask or identify that clients ask to get to like the root of that. So based on that, that's, 10 and then 3 each. So we're looking at 40 different topics. I'm a big believer, and I'm glad you said this, that some people like to watch videos, some people like to listen to audio, some people like to read long format, read shorthand. So you've now come up with, assuming those 4 formats times 40, what's that? 160 different pieces of content that you can create and do so in the formats in which people like to receive information. And then furthermore, when you get off a call with a prospect, right? And let's say they wanted help with, their distribution planning, right? So they're on the cusp of being able to retire and they want to know, what does life look like when I start distributing my assets because I've just spent 40 years accumulating them. Perhaps you were interviewed on the podcast where you talked about your philosophy in that regard. So when you send the follow-up email, you do the thing that you normally do, it would be incredibly easy to say, cheers, David, P.S. I was actually recently interviewed on such and such a podcast specifically around distribution planning, and perhaps there's some things in this episode that expand upon our conversation today. I'd love for you to listen. And that accomplishes a few different things. I really want to make sure that people listening to this get this.
Yes.
Not only does it to a certain degree save your time by not having to repeat the entire thing that was already documented, but the fact that you were on someone else's podcast or guest blogger or whatever edifies you in that process. And what they're also doing is that 30, 45, 60-minute podcast, they're spending more time with you.
Right.
Without you having to spend that time with them. And it just makes everything go smoother. It lets people kind of check you out a little bit more, and it brings them to their decision faster, in my opinion, because trust isn't just based on elapsed time. And I've said this multiple times on our show. It's based on the accumulation of experiences. And the more experiences they have with you, be it one-on-one like you and I are doing right now, or leveraged when I share this episode out to other folks and you share this episode out to other folks, it's based on the accumulation of experiences. So give them more opportunities to experience you so what you just said is exactly how I think, which I
Let
think
me add
is
two pieces to
awesome.
that.
You left two things out?
No, you made me think of two things that further solidify what you just said. And we're playing ping pong. Oh, you said this, check this out. Okay. So I teach my clients to do the exact same thing. Like for instance, have you ever seen on their website FAQ section? Boring, who cares? What if you had an FAQ like, oh, how should I distribute my blah, blah, blah? Rather than clicking and have this, 4-paragraph thing, why don't you click it and have this embed code for that podcast episode where you don't send them off your website, they listen to it right there. But in the email scenario, like you said, put it in PS because, the body they scan, PS, that catches their attention. But here's the other thing. When you are interviewed, you're the one that's the expert being asked the questions. You're not pushing and saying deadline and scarcity and you need to buy it. No, you're the one just talking, teaching. So it's that positioning in their mind that you're the expert because you're being asked the questions. And secondly, here's something that people don't pick up on: the imposter syndrome. Well, I'm good, but I don't know. The more you are out there and you're interviewed and you are, all of a sudden you start sitting up and taking notes and going, hey, boy, that interviewer was really impressed. And my clients, when I sent that out, they're like, and hey, that was a really, and you're like, yeah. And your confidence grows in your own self. Now, yeah, you got the knowledge in your head, but you start speaking a little bit more confident because you hear yourself and you hear the reactions that you're getting when you put it on your social media and your client, your prospect, in the market, whatever, they're like, hey, that was a really good point. Oh, thank you for that. I never thought of it that way. So your confidence grows. And I think that's a huge mindset shift that people don't pick up on.
I feel like intuitively I know that, but I never kind of acknowledged that or articulated that, where you get those dopamine hits from people sharing and liking and whatnot. And it really does help with that and gives you a little extra swagger. And hopefully it doesn't turn into cockiness, but stays with confidence. So we've talked a lot about content and the importance of doing so.
Right. Yes.
Do you feel as if an advisor needs to have a good brand before being featured in press releases, or press releases before having a good brand, or it doesn't matter? Like, what are your thoughts in regards to when someone should look to link up with the press?
Well, chicken, egg, that whole thing, that it's like, what do you do first? And just jump and grow your wings on the way down. I remember attributing that to Les Brown, right? Just get her done. Done is better than perfect. And you could polish up and you know what? A good brand is not your logo, not your website. Those are elements of the brand. You know what? In my opinion, part of the brand is, and it's one of the 4 Ps of marketing and academia, positioning. It's where you are positioned in the mind of your consumer. Well, do they view you as someone with rings on every finger and gold and pushy? No. If you are teaching and you are educating and you're an advocate for their success and you're like, David, you know what? You mentioned that I don't think this is going to be, why don't you consider? And they're like, oh yeah, that's pretty good. So you do all that. That's your brand. And of course you need to have a decent enough website. All that needs to be done. Because if you look like you've got a AOL account and a Craigslist website, that's not going to work. So you need that, but get her done. Just go, but go with restraint. It's kind of like taking risk. Take calculated risk. You got to take some risk, but take calculated risk. So build that brand by serving and giving value and teaching and honoring and listening. And then when you hear things, you tweak your messaging and you're like, you know what? I literally 2 days ago was speaking with an advisor and I thought that he was interested in this package right here. And as I was talking to him, I was like, hey, how's things been going? And he goes, you know what? Because they do this special program where they do events and seminars at strategic alliance locations. And he goes, man, we should have been having trouble getting people in the seats. And I said, oh, hold on a second. This thing that we're going to talk about here right now is good, but you need this. Let me tell you how you can get more registrations, get more people in the seats, and get more people from there coming into your office. He's like, please tell Obi-Wan Kenobi. So you have to be nimble and ready to adjust. So to answer the question, you start now. It's like the thing about the tree, right? It's a hot day and I sure wish I had the tree of shade planted 20 years ago. Well, you didn't do it. The next best time is now. So you get going and then you polish and tweak and iterate and always improve, because Tony Robbins teaches constant and never-ending improvement.
So that's helpful. Another question before we start to wrap up, I've always been curious about, because I've been featured in, Fox and ABC and CBS and all these different news sources. And when I would post the articles that, they published on, my backstory and whatever the topic was at the time, I got an outpouring of love from people I was connected to on social media. Little did they know that I paid for that attention, right? And paid to get published. So my question then becomes kind of twofold. And I don't know if you have like data to support this or just kind of a gut feel. What percentage of people that you see who are leveraging the logos that they were published in, how many of them were paid? How many of them were invited and not paid? And then does it actually matter? Like, is it just perception is reality, or can people smell that, from the outside looking in? Can you help me understand that?
I don't know that there's any data that would say what percentage is paid or not, but guess what? Pay to play is the same difference as Google ads and Facebook ads. When you advertise, you have that, you're paying for that. So am I going to not click on something that feels like, oh, that could really help me, but he probably paid for that? No, get noticed, right? Let's add to that answering of the question with the example of the goldfish and attention, right? You've heard that before, haven't you? The average goldfish has more attention span than me and you, because it's like, man, we're just busy, busy, busy. So we don't have time to sit there and analyze and go, I don't know what, man, you got mentioned on, you got featured in. I'm reading a book right now called Shift by Jeremiah Desmarais, and it's a wonderful book. He's with advisors. And one of the chapters in the book, he was talking about, hey, look at this guy. Here's Fred. Here's his picture. Would you pay him $500 to do your financial plan? They're like, when I ask people in the room, that people are like, no. But then look at this picture of him, same guy as seen on. And now people are like, oh yeah, because your gut reaction is, oh, they're trustworthy, because it's called a trust trigger. The same reason why when you go to Amazon, Netflix, and it's like, oh, what's hot? Oh, people that bought this also bought. People want to have that feeling that, oh, they're trustworthy. So when you have that quick knee-jerk reaction of, oh, if they've been seen here or featured on there, I don't know who paid what, where, and how. But if you're going to pay some PR agency 5-10 grand a month or a huge amount of money, that's a big decision. So why not get something where while you're getting those out there, you're going to start getting some attention. Maybe you're going to get what's called earned media. That's the alternative of that is earned media. Paid media is, you're paying for this privilege to be seen and fast track your authority. Earned media is people come knocking at your door. That can come, cool. But you know what? Your prospects, their attention is like, oh, cool. And should I trade my email address to David for that thing he's given me? Or is he just going to blast the daylights out of me? Oh, well, if he's been featured, yeah, he looks legit. And so I think that's the thing that people need to keep in mind is that initial reaction. And let's just even touch on this too. A lot of advisors are doing the outreach through LinkedIn to affluent families of business owners, and you're in the sea of sameness. They're doing workshops and webinars and live events. So how do you fill those seats? Well, maybe on that landing page is as featured on. Maybe it's hey, here's the embed code. And I want to stress the word embed code, not a link to this podcast episode I was interviewed on where I'm going to send you off of my landing page and now you get distracted and never come back. But maybe the landing page is you need to understand the blah, 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 blah. In this event, we're going to be teaching you register now. Maybe right before the register now is, hey, and by the way, I was featured on this podcast episode where I spoke about this very thing, and then they can listen to it right there. And maybe they listen to 5, 6, 7 minutes of it, maybe not the whole thing, but that's enough to go, I like their style, click register. So maybe these authority positioning assets, like I call them, help you get more registrations for your thing. Maybe in the email follow-up is, hey, David, thanks for registering for the upcoming event. It's going to be at, hey, by the way, PS, I know that you might have listened to that interview that I put on the landing page, but I was interviewed another time where I talked about this other topic. Check this out. And now in the follow-up emails, you're solidifying their registration to get them to the event by giving more authority positioning assets. I've got a federal trademark on the phrase authority positioning portfolio, which ties into a financial portfolio, right? What's in the portfolio? Lots of things. Well, what's in your authority positioning portfolio to make you look like an authority? It could be podcast interviews, several on several topics. It could be features in, it could be you wrote a book. It could be you're just featured in a book. It could be publicity. So all of these things become your portfolio, and pull out these assets and tie them into what you're already doing. And I think one of the key things to think about, I am not saying, hey, David, stop doing all this other stuff you're doing. Start doing what I've got. Nope. Because authority positioning, when you're seen as an authority, amplifies what you're already doing to make it perform that much better.
That's awesome. Because one of the things before I made the post about being featured that I was nervous about was, oh, they're going to smell this from a mile away. But it was the total opposite response. And the fact that, or the way in which you just explained it in terms of their attention span and not really having the time or interest to think about it beyond seeing a logo that they recognize really makes sense. And also I want to thank you because you reminded me of someone that I need to have on my podcast. I had dinner a couple of years ago with Jeremiah, and it's been a while since him and I connected. So I'll have to have him touch base with him and have him on the show. So thanks for the reminder.
You are welcome.
So before we wrap up, if I'm an advisor and I'm listening to this and I say, hey, I am going to break the ice or continue along with my content strategy, and I really want to add the authoritative strategy as well, and getting featured in publications and, building my brand in that regard. I know you help folks with that. So if they want to get in touch with you, if they want to figure out what it is that you offer, how you can help them, where should they be going?
My main website is authoritypositioningcoach.com. And so you can read, testimonials and case studies and things like that. But I just put out this new mini audio seminar series called Authoritize Your Agency. And you can get that at authoritizeyouragency.com. And it's really cool because they're short, quick audio seminars, AKA podcast episodes that I did. And it's delivered in a really unique technology with QR and on your mobile phone, as well as, you can go right to the website, but they're quick and easy and hard hitting and teaching things like the buyer's journey, things like ZMOT, the zero moment of truth. Well, how does that tie into drawing people to you? So that's very educational and helpful. And I think the biggest thing is you could have, this knowledge in your head to go, I need to have all this stuff, but man, my schedule is packed. I don't have time to sit through 12 weeks of a mastermind, learn how to do it, and then maybe try to do it wrong. So you could hire an agency for a lot of money, or you can have some done for you quick, easy, and that gets that momentum going. So that's what I'd be happy to chat with. And, I pride myself in very well-placed advice, caring about my clients, and very affordable. So it's not even a matter of, I don't want to talk to him because he's going to push me into some expensive thing. Nope, not going to happen. But let's just chat. So authoritizeyouragency.com would be a great place to start.
Awesome. And for those of you who are listening, I do want to say thank you to all of you as well. I've mentioned this in a couple other episodes, but in case you haven't listened to those ones yet, because of all of you and because of our great guests like Mike, who are sharing our show as well, I found out a couple months ago that we're actually in the top 2.5% of all podcasts globally. So I want to just say thank you for your listenership. Thank you for sharing the episodes. And as a thank you for doing so, if you're listening to this episode and you want access to what we referred to earlier as a client journey map to get an idea of how we kind of think through this stuff and some ways that you can go ahead and create some content, just shoot me an email at david@modelfa.com. And in the subject line, just put client journey map Mike Saunders, Saunders, so I know what episode this is in regards to, and I'm happy to send them your way. So thank you for your advocacy, Mike. Thank you for joining, and we'll chat with everyone soon.